During more than 2 decades as Egypt's last independent pharaoh, Cleopatra engaged in ruthless power struggles with her siblings, battled the future Roman Empire, and engaged in military alliances and passionate affairs with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. She was remembered as one of the most brilliant and alluring figures in history. Cleopatra was born the third child of King Ptolemy the 12th in 69 BC. Her name meant glory of the father. Cleopatra's 2 older sisters died before her father, leaving her with the rights due to the firstborn child. While Cleopatra was born in Egypt, she was not actually Egyptian. Most scholars agree that her family origins can be traced in Macedonian Greece, and Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals. Ptolemy took the reins of Egypt after Alexander's death, and he launched a dynasty of Greek-speaking rulers that lasted more than 300 years. Like many of the royal houses, members of the Ptolemaic dynasty often married within their families to preserve the purity of the bloodline. In keeping with the custom, Cleopatra eventually married both of her younger brothers. Each of them served as her ceremonial spouse and co-regent at the different times during her reign. Cleopatra became the co-ruler of Egypt at the death of her father in 51 BC. She was only 18 years old. Cleopatra used the Egyptian religion learned during her childhood to identify herself as the new version of the goddess Isis, and also later as the goddess Aphrodite, revealing her family's Greek roots. The queen carefully crafted a pageantry of luxury and embellishment. Although she was not simply the golden seductress featured in Hollywood movies, Egyptologists considered her ability to reinvent herself to fit any situation to be a key part of her brilliance in politics. Ancient Egyptian records reveal Cleopatra to be an intelligent and powerful ruler. The philosopher Plutarch described her as not as a stunning beauty, but as a captivating, persuasive, and charming leader. Although Egypt remained a large and wealthy empire, a new, more powerful force was rising. In 168 BC, almost 100 years before Cleopatra's birth, Rome became an overseer of Egypt and the Egyptian royal family. An alliance between the 2 empires helped keep the Ptolemy family in rule over the fading empire. At the death of Cleopatra's father, the Roman leader Pompey was appointed guardianship over Cleopatra and her brother. His duty was to ensure tributes were paid to Rome on the behalf of Egypt. Approximately 1 year into her reign, Cleopatra took advantage of the age difference between her and her brother and decided to ignore him. She removed his name from all official documents, and a craftsman designed money featuring her name and image. For 3 years, she ruled without regard to her brother. During this time, she began to worry court officials by her actions. They considered her brother easier to control, so they plotted to overthrow her in favor of her brother. In 48 BC, her brother, under the care of his advisors, forced Cleopatra to flee from the royal capital of Alexandria. She reacted by forming an army of her own. While Cleopatra fought to regain control of Egypt, the Roman guardian Pompey was fighting his own battles in a civil war against his fellow Romans. Pompey sought refuge with Cleopatra's brother, only to be murdered the moment he arrived at Alexandria. 4 days later, Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria with 3,200 legionnaires and 800 cavalry soldiers. Riots broke out throughout the capital city. Caesar took control of the royal city and began the process of restoring order. Cleopatra acted quickly to ensure that she would be the sole ruler of Egypt. Knowing her brother's forces would try to stop her attempts to meet with Caesar, Cleopatra had herself wrapped in a carpet and smuggled into his personal quarters. Historians believe that Caesar was amused by her brilliant strategy and dazzled by the sight of the young queen in her royal clothes. The two soon became allies and lovers. She was only 21 years old, while Caesar was 52. In addition to a personal attraction, a relationship between Cleopatra and Caesar would greatly benefit them both. Caesar was known for accumulating high levels of debt. Cleopatra wished to be restored to power, which would make her the richest woman in the world. Ptolemy quickly became aware that Cleopatra had formed an alliance with Caesar that could not be broken, but he had no intention of giving up his throne so easily. 20,000 soldiers surrounded Alexandria in 47 BC. During the result of the battle, parts of the Alexandria library were destroyed by fire. Caesar's forces maintained an upper hand by maintaining authority over the Pharaoh's lighthouse and the harbor. Ptolemy drowned in the Nile while trying to flee. At the death of her brother, Cleopatra became the sole ruler of Egypt. Despite the years of chaos and confusion, the Egyptian priests and people still held tightly to their traditions and customs. In order to be fully restored to her throne, she was required to marry her younger brother, who became Ptolemy XIV. He was only 11 years old and appeared not to be active in the rule of Egypt. On June 23, 47 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to her first son, Caesarion, also known as Ptolemy Caesar. The child represented a vital connection between Rome and Egypt. Cleopatra joined Julius Caesar in Rome beginning in 46 BC, and her presence seemed to have caused quite a stir. Caesar didn't hide that she was his mistress. She even came to the city with their son, Caesarion. Caesar openly claimed their son and declared that he would marry Cleopatra despite the laws against bigamy and foreign marriage. Caesar continued to conquer his rivals, with Cleopatra by his side. He had politically placed himself as dictator of Rome. On March 15, 44 BC, a conspiracy formed by Roman senators resulted in the assassination of Julius Caesar. He was stabbed to death outside of the Senate building in Rome. They feared that Caesar was planning to take over the Republic by declaring himself a god. Cleopatra and her son were not named in Caesar's will. A month after his death, Cleopatra was forced to flee Rome and return to Egypt. Upon arriving, her brother Ptolemy XIV died of poisoning. Cleopatra was now the sole ruler of Egypt. Cleopatra waited and watched around closely for indications who would be the next powerful leader. By successfully defeating Caesar's enemies, the Roman Mark Antony became a powerful leader in Rome. In 41 BC, Antony invited Cleopatra to Tarsus to discuss her aid in campaign against the Parthian Empire. This time, instead of arriving rolled in a rug asking for help, she arrived in splendid glory. Although Egypt was now on the brink of bankruptcy, Cleopatra arrived in Tarsus on a ship outfitted with silver oars. Purple sails announced the arrival of not only a queen, but a goddess, dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love. She captured the attention of Mark Antony. He was so charmed by her that he abandoned his plans and left with her for Alexandria. Within a year, Cleopatra gave birth to 2 twins, one boy and one girl. Mark Antony had returned to Rome and did not see Cleopatra for 4 years. He finally returned to Egypt and reunited with Cleopatra and his children. He officially recognized them as his children and named them Alexandria Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Mark Antony married Cleopatra in Antioch in 37 BC. Antony's Roman wife Octavia remained loyal to him, but her brother Octavian was outraged. Octavian used propaganda to portray Antony as a traitor under the sway of his scheming seductress. In 32 BC, the Roman Senate declared war on Cleopatra. The conflict reached its climax in the following year, in a famous naval battle at Actium. Cleopatra personally led several dozen Egyptian warships into the fray, alongside Antony's fleet, but they were no match for Octavian's navy. Cleopatra became afraid of being captured and removed her ships from the battle. Mark Antony's forces were not strong enough on their own, and were defeated. His army surrendered, although he retreated to Alexandria to avoid capture after receiving false orders of his wife's death. He killed himself with his own sword. Cleopatra was ordered to appear before Octavian. He explained to her that her days as a queen were over. She would be taken through the cities she had ruled in shame as a slave. Egyptian religion provided her an escape. Death by snakebite would provide her with immortality. On August 12, 30 BC, she had a snake brought to her hidden inside a basket of figs. Legend has it that she died by enticing the snake to bite her arm. This ensured that she would be remembered as a queen and not a slave. She was only 39 years old. She was buried with Mark Antony. The death of Cleopatra ended centuries of Egyptian pharaohs. The Roman emperors took over control of Egypt, and Octavian was named Caesar Augustus. While some historians note that Cleopatra was succeeded by her son Caesarion as the last pharaoh, he never actually ruled. He was strangled to death before he could succeed her to the throne. Although not known for exceptional beauty like the other Egyptian queens, Cleopatra's accomplishments came through her intelligence and sense of diplomacy. She secured the Roman Empire as an ally through the relationships with Caesar and Mark Antony. Her accomplishments held together the Egyptian empire during its decline. To this day, she continues to be a muse, inspiring 5 ballets, 45 operas, 77 plays, and at least 8 major motion films. She is officially known as the last pharaoh of Egypt, but in the memorable phrase of critic Harold Bloom, she was also known as the world's first celebrity.